Hey everyone, this is Tom Mason, and I'm back with another episode of the Mini Sculpting Super Show. This time it's a chat with Bill Thornhill. So, hey, there's Bill.
It's me.
So, the last time Bill, well, I was going to say the last time Bill was on here, we did an interview back in March of 2019, which was right before I went on a hiatus. But Bill and I actually have started another show that we do with Patrick Keith called The Sculptors. So, many of you might have actually already seen him on my channel when we did that first episode.
Not too
But
long ago.
yeah, not too long ago. We're working on more of those, so keep your eyes peeled. We should have another one out fairly soon. But in the meantime, Bill and I, we've actually been talking about this for a while. When we kind of came up with the idea of doing the sculptures, we wanted to just get together and chat about our own little journey into digital sculpting and kind of how things have changed for us and the industry and what that looked like from how we began and where we've gone. So Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we kind of started around the same time. Um, when did you started to really look into transitioning to digital sculpting?
I think probably around 2019, maybe.
Okay.
I think now, yeah, 2019. It was before the pandemic started, so I think that kind of solidified why I ended up doing digital sculpture because I had time to
Yeah.
do it after the pandemic struck. Yeah, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was just before, maybe late 2018. But I dabbled with the software for quite a bit. I probably had the software about 2 years up until that point. But you know
Yeah.
what it's when you've got to learn something new, you kind of like, oh, I'll do it in a bit. I'll do it in a bit, and I kept putting it off. And even my wife said, you need to learn this. You should learn it. I said, oh, don't worry, there's no panic. And I should have taken her advice and just learned it 2 years earlier. But yeah, there you go. So
I
yeah, not
was
too
yeah.
long.
I was pretty much the same way. I mean, I first started to learn it at the very end of my time with MegaCon Games.
Mhm.
We had to do a little city model called Farron Rock for the Dark Frontier board game, and it was going to have these pieces that broke off, and so that was a great piece to learn on because it wasn't, making an organic figure, and it was a
Yeah.
little bit more hard line, straight edge stuff.
Mm.
But it was a challenge and a journey to learn ZBrush, and I did that figure, and then I think my next one I did several little easy things for RBJ games, and then
Mm.
I think 2018 I finally did a real full figure for myself, but it was very much sporadic. I would finally sit down like, okay, I have to progress to some degree. So if it didn't feel like I
Mm.
was actually really digital sculpting until more recently, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think it was the same for me. I think I just did it with it and messed around, and I was lucky enough to meet Bobby Jackson. I met Bobby through you, didn't I? I've
Possibly,
got a feeling I
did you
did.
meet him before that Historicon? I know you got to sit with him at that.
No, no, I met him at that Historicon. Um, and we got. I might have spoke to him before then, but I hadn't met him. But anyway, I was lucky enough to get in touch with Bobby, and Bobby, he had a what are they called? It's basically like an open mic on his computer with him, and there's another guy from
Probably
Reaper
Gene,
Miniatures, and
Gene
they'd
Van
say
Horn.
yes, yeah, yes, yeah, and they just chat when they got bored with each other, so they could so they. It was like that they weren't alone, sat there sculpting kind of thing, and they invited me onto that, and they were kind enough to kind of share their screens and then let me watch their process of
Mm,
how they built figures, which was really helpful. Just watching it be done. And I had this big. One of the things I wanted to do was be able to make a sword, because
mm,
making a sword in traditional sculpting is just a pain in the butt. It really is. And so that was one of the things I wanted to do. I need to learn how to make a sword, and I had this big convoluted way of doing it, and it was never quite right. And then Gene showed me this way of making one, which like it took him about, I don't know, 7 seconds to make the blade, and I was just like, oh. It's crazy how easy it was.
That's cool.
Something that would have taken a couple of hours to make easily, traditionally.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the big benefits, isn't it? It's the speed.
Yeah, absolutely. The speed, the reusable parts, and I've talked about this before. You can actually find you can work in it very similar ways. Like you can reuse parts traditional, you can reuse parts digital. You can, I don't know, I'm actually out of examples, but that's one that always sticks in my mind because that's a huge part of digital, but it is just that much easier. And when you're doing it traditional, you're reusing this bit and then you got to reuse that exact same bit. Or if you modify it slightly,
Oh,
it's now this bit instead of that bit. And now you have
yeah.
in digital, you have this one, and then you take it and you
Mhm.
modify it, and now you have this one, and you can use either one of them as many times as you want.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
One of the things I really like is hands. Is only having to make a hand pose once, because
Yeah.
then you've got it in your life and you can just drag it out whenever you want. And you might have to tweak it a little bit depending on what it's holding,
Hmm.
but just so much easier. It really is.
That's a good
Um,
suggestion. That's something I haven't done as much of. I will go grab it out of figures I've already done, but I've seen a few other sculptors. They actually will have a library of hands that they say, "Oh, I really like how I did this
yeah,
hand," and so they just have a
yeah.
bunch of those in one file, and you snag it. That's yeah,
It's well
good
worth doing,
suggestion.
definitely. And I haven't really um, I haven't got a full library of the things I'd like, but it's I know that hands are very useful to have. Different head poses, eyeing people talking,
Hmm.
shouting, growl, snarling, or whatever, and just a plain face. It's handy to have them as blanks. Um, I think one of the things I've found recently is that with the transition from traditional to digital, you think you've got to do everything different, but actually, they kind of the production line you can keep exactly the same way. What you would do in traditional sculpting, for those of you that don't know, is we would build, if we were building a range of figures, we would ideally build dolls, which were basically a torso and legs in different poses, and then you would build each figure on those different poses. Um, and I kind of forgot that, and I was doing all new poses for everything.
Mm.
And then realized I was kind of doubling up continuously on the leg poses, because there's only so many
Yeah.
so many ways you can pose a leg. So I just thought, why am I not doing what I've done for years? So now I'm building a library of leg poses. So that again is quicker to put things together with.
Hmm.
Um, and I think you forget the simplicity of traditional sculpting when you're starting at the beginning, where you start with a little wireframe and you're blocking your bulk of your figure, the overall shape. It's all about form at that point,
Hmm.
and it's the same with digital sculpting. It's all about form. Um, so once you've got that form right for your little mannequin, then you can build on that continuously for forever, kind of thing. So yeah, that was one of the things that I think I'd forgotten, and I'm glad I've kind of remembered.
Yeah, well, that dolly idea and suggestion is so good and so useful. That's actually because what tipped me over the edge, I was really starting to enjoy it. I liked it, and I was seeing the
Mm.
benefits of it. Um, we can get into some of the other reasons to do it as well, especially if you want to work in the industry and not just do it as a hobby. Um, but when I really took the leap was when I decided to finally do my Goblin Kickstarter, and there's 20 different goblins. And they're all basically the same. So, as far as a lot of the detail, the general detail. And so, yeah, I took a lot of the same poses. And I think I probably was overdoing them a little bit, like you were saying, doing a little bit more adjustments than were really necessary. But I definitely was able, even with that, I was taking the base poses I had done before, and then I was just adjusting that slightly rather than
Yeah.
starting from scratch every time. I think I made like four generic poses that kind of covered a lot of ground, and then if I needed to make additional tweaks, I would do that. But it was mostly arms and head. to make a lot of
And it's
variety.
a lot easier to do that, isn't it? Than if you've got a mannequin, you can tweak it in digital. Where
Hmm.
tweaking it in traditional is a lot more work because you're then having to cut some of the material away to
Yeah,
bend the
repairing
armature and
it.
then
You can break
wait for it to
it.
dry. Yeah, then
Yeah.
realise you didn't want to do that anyway. Throw it away. So having that flexibility of just being able to continuously change it
Hmm.
and not worry that the clay is set, the
Yeah.
putty's set, and you're not fixed to that. You can completely just change the whole thing. And not only can you change the whole thing, you can save what you've got in case you mess it
Yeah.
up, changing the whole thing and go back to what you
Keep
want.
those
Whereas traditional,
iterations so you can branch at different
traditional,
points.
it's do or die.
Yeah.
And there's that well-known phrase, which is "kill your darlings," isn't it? And in traditional sculpting, you just sometimes have to look at the figure you've made, that you've spent hours making, and go, "Nope, it's wrong," and throw it away and start again. And I've done that a few times, and it's quite heartbreaking, really.
Hmm.
Mm.
So what would you say started to intrigue you about it or get you to want to make the leap to digital? Because you've been, I mean, you've been a master mold maker at Foundry, you've sculpted for years, and yeah, what?
Yeah, I think I don't know whether there's one trigger, but I started to see more and more people posting their renders, their digital renders. And a lot of the historical miniatures were starting to be done in plastics. And obviously, well, not obviously, but they were all done in digital for the most part, apart from the Perry's stuff, who still made big three
Mhm.
ups for their plastics. But a lot of people were using digital, and it's kind of I found it quite intriguing. And there was a guy, there still is a guy called Dave Whitaker who um, who has Titan Troll miniatures, and I noticed he just randomly popped up on Facebook one of his renders on one of the groups that I was in, and it was just such a great figure. I think it was a Minotaur, if I remember rightly. And I just thought that's just such a great figure. Just everything about it I just loved about it. The attention to detail that he managed to put in, which I thought I'd never be able to put that in on, by hand, or if I did, it would take it, quite a while to do. And I liked the fact you can get proper symmetry. That was
Mhm.
nice. Something very difficult to do in traditional sculpting. Yeah, just everything about that particular figure just made me completely and utterly intrigued. And so I went and bought ZBrush. And the reason I bought ZBrush was because I knew other people, including yourself, had it. And I think I remember asking you, what you were using,
Mhm.
and I did that very deliberately because I wanted someone on hand that I could ask, how the hell do you use this
Yeah.
thing? um, and it was what is it? It's about 800 bucks, I think, 900
Mhm.
bucks maybe, which is a lot of money.
Not
Um,
compared to some other softwares, especially in
Compared
3D,
to, no,
but it is nothing to
yeah,
sneeze at, that's for
it
sure.
was a lot of money. It was a lot of money for me at the
Yeah,
time. Let's
no,
put it that
it
way.
is. I just when you look at some of the like key shot rendering and some of these other things, you're like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, that's just to do one thing, or
yeah, yeah. Um, so I think, yeah, I paid for that. And what I would have advised anyone to do now, not that I've got anything against ZBrush, because I think ZBrush is a great tool to have. But if you're starting out, I would use Blender,
hmm,
because everything that you need as a sculptor, as a miniature sculptor, you've got in Blender for free. You don't need most of the stuff that's in ZBrush. ZBrush is really nice, but you know, Blender will do everything that you need it to do. So, if anyone was going to start in digital sculpting, that's exactly where I'd go.
and that's come a long way since we began as well. So before, I kind of the same thing. I wasn't using Blender, but early on, I had Mudbox, which I don't know if it's been retired now, but it was a lot more.
Play,
Yeah, it was a lot more intuitive because it was more. it was more similar to other programs I had used. ZBrush has a weird history of how it built out of trying to create. It was really a 2D art program that was trying to
Yes,
render 3D looks in a 2D format, right? And that's a whole another story. Like when I was learning, I feel like there were these stages where I would learn certain aspects of ZBrush at different times, and then it all started to start to add up, and then things started to make sense. But until that point, it was like you're reading hieroglyphics or something.
it really is. I mean, it's a really steep learning curve. If you can already sculpt traditionally, you're kind of 80% of the way there.
You just have to be
The
shown the
20%,
path to get the few things you really need to do.
yeah, it's like that 20% though is the learning curve is like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavy, and I think like you, I kept dipping in and out of watching YouTube channels and just like squirreling away, even kind of subconsciously, really, all these little bits of info, and then I think just over time, things start to click. It's like anything, I guess, when you learn anything,
Yeah.
it just clicks eventually. And I think, when I'm going to say about 2 years ago, I was still messing around. No, I was still messing around up until last September. I'd not actually made a full figure. And last September, I turned around to myself and said, "You've got this really expensive program here. You need to justify the money you've spent on it." So I sat down. I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to make a figure. And I sat down. And I took 3 days on it because, again, I was still learning. It didn't just flow. Even though I had a lot of the basics in my head, I was still having to look things up on YouTube channels, out bits and bobs. But eventually I did it, and I made a kind of a 40k zealot priest for the Imperial Guard. And I made it, and I was just like, wow, that's actually not bad. And I've made a figure. I can do this.
It's a
I
turning
think it was
point,
that.
isn't it, when you finally finish one? Because up until then, it feels like you're just, oh, I figured out this little aspect and this little aspect, but you still don't believe you can actually make sculpt in it. That's how I felt, at least.
That's right. And I have this whole fear of failure, fear of success thing. So the thing that stops me doing it is because I think it won't be good enough. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I'm going, well, I'm not going to make it because I don't think it'll be good enough. But once you actually tip over that edge, that's it. You're fine. You know you can do it, and it's you're away. And then that was it. I was hooked. Now, when I was traditionally sculpting, I would come into this room and I would struggle to sit here for more than a couple of hours. And then I'd want to go off and do something else. But now with digital sculpting, I actually have to be dragged out of here in the evenings by the wife. Like, you're finished now, come on. So there's a big difference in the kind of, I don't know, the gratification you get from it, because you can see instant results a lot faster than you could traditionally. There's no drying times for, putty and all that kind of stuff. So I think that, I suppose psychologically, it's I find it more gratifying.
Very cool. Let's see, what else were we going to touch on? So I guess so we don't have too much to there. I'll jump into the next thing. So one of the cool things you've been doing has you've jumped into this whole. You've really jumped into digital. So obviously we're both sculpting, but what I do is still I'm still marketing them traditionally. I'm still making metal miniatures, or physical miniatures, that'd be the better term. And you have really embraced the STL route.
Yeah.
And you're handling that a couple different ways. Yeah, go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, it's kind of it's really intriguing. Well, when I first discovered it still is really, is the fact that you can have this whole idea of, you don't even have to mail order. You can just instantly buy a figure, go to your printer and go and print off as many as you want. I remember years ago, my buddy Ryan and I were walking through Adepticon, probably about, well, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. And there was a little stall there, and he had these little FDM printers, and he print off the guy. I can't remember the name of the
Were they
stall,
printing like
but
boats or
yes,
yeah,
boats.
I
Yeah,
know who you're talking
the
about. I
guy.
can't remember the name either.
And he'd do these little Viking boats and things like that, and you just watch it going around. And Ryan turned around, and he said, "You'll be able to print armies in a few years. You'll just order, you'll just download it and just print it off." I was like, and I was looking at the FDM printers and thinking, yeah, they're not very good though, because back in when it first started, the detail that they could hold was fairly minimal.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine for terrain and things, but for miniatures, it was, you were pushing it. But then resin printers came on the scene, and all of a sudden you could have a really well detailed figure.
Yeah.
Just and you just download it. And um, I think the shift now is beginning to grow, because you notice a lot more people have printers now
Mm-hmm.
because they're more affordable. You can get a really good printer for like $250, which is not much. Then you can pay a lot more. I mean, Forrest, who runs Knuckle Duster Miniatures, when I first actually saw a 3D printer the first time, he showed me his, and his cost him 20 grand when he bought it.
Wow.
Which is like, uh, but that was years ago. And in fact, I actually missed this out because Forrest was one of the big catalysts in why I
Yeah.
went to
I
digital.
remember you telling me about what he was doing before I was still just dabbling.
Yeah, it was crazy. I'd look at his figures, and when he was sculpting traditionally, and they were nice figures, but they were nothing. They didn't pop in any particular way. And I think he'll fully accept that what I'm saying now is that as soon as he went to digital, it was black and white.
Mm.
His sculpts were just fantastic, and I couldn't. I found it hard to reconcile that they were both done by the same sculptor, because the detail and the sheer beauty of the figures was just eye popping. And when I saw them printed up, when I saw them cast up next to each other, it's just like night and day.
Mm.
I think that was actually one of the big catalysts for me. I can't believe I didn't forget. I didn't remember that at the start. But that was a big eye opener for me to notice someone could go from one thing to another with no transition period. He just went over and learned it on digital, and bam,
Mm.
that was it. So I think that was a real eye opener for me. And yeah, his stuff now is just beautiful.
Yeah,
It
he's
really
got
is. It's some
quite
of
a
the
range
if
too.
anyone likes Wild West figures, you need to check out Knuckle Duster because he does fantastic
Mm.
figures. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, going back to the printers thing, yeah, he paid 20 grand for
Did he get
his.
his? He did his to prototype and master though, right? I mean, it wasn't just for printing for fun
Yeah,
armies.
no, he prints off
Yeah.
masters for actual production molds and things like that. So it's a different level
Mm.
of printer than what we have. I've got in my basement is just a frozen
Mm.
Sonic 4K. It's only a little dinky printer, but it's all I need for printing off test prints
Yeah.
for the things I do. But yeah, I mean, just the affordability now makes it just a foregone conclusion that it's going to be very, very, prolific in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think most gamers will have or will know someone who's got a printer.
Yeah.
And I think it's like anything. You want to get in at the start of something new, and not that I'm at the start, but I'm kind of, at the tail end of the start. So, I think there's a lot more to come
Mm-hmm.
where printing concerns. I mean, the quality level will just go up and up and up
Yeah.
over time.
So talk about what.
I mean,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say I've got a 4K printer, but now they're
I
doing
know.
8K
I
printers.
just got. I haven't even
It's
opened
like,
mine yet, but I bought a 4K. I was like, yay! And then 8K. But it's okay. I mean, I'm mostly getting them for test prints and playing. anyway. So
4K is more.
yeah.
I have no problem with the level of detail of a 4K. To be honest with you, I mean, if you want to print something off, paint it up for a painting competition, then yeah, maybe get an 8K. But for just printing gaming figures, a 4K is more than good enough. Yeah, and I don't even use mine on its finest setting. Mine's still on kind of one of the medium to low settings, so it's still good enough. Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about what exactly you're doing. So you're not doing footsore anymore. What are you doing now in the digital realm?
So what I decided to do was indulge myself in things that I hadn't done before, because over the years, all I've done is sculpt historical figures. I didn't do any science fiction. I didn't do any fantasy figures, which is kind of strange because the thing that got me into the hobby in the first place was science fiction and fantasy. But just things just take you a certain direction. I just ended up just making Dark Age figures for forever. And when I went digital and decided I was going to go down the STL route, I started doing research and found Patreon, which I'd not heard of before. And then, I dug through it and realized that people were making pretty good money from just selling their STLs on Patreon. Well, not selling them, but having patrons that they give the STLs to as part of their monthly subscription. And I kind of, I must admit, I was a bit gobsmacked that some people could have like 7,000 subscribers. Now, admittedly, these are studios, and there's a number of sculptors there, but they, 7,000 subscribers at $10 a month.
Wow, gosh.
even split between 4 sculptors, that's a pretty good income a month. Now, I'm not a studio, I'm a one-man band, same as a lot of the people out there. And, getting to that kind of level is a pipe dream way down the road. But it doesn't really matter. You've got to start somewhere. And I'm slowly crawling up. Every month it goes up, just by a little bit some months, and then by a good chunk. Like this month, I've had, in the first week, I had 9 subscribers in the first week, which is really, really good.
Awesome.
What I do is I indulge myself by doing sci-fi and fantasy figures. And I get a lot of my ideas from the people who subscribe to me. Rather than just going, here, this is what I made, this is what you get. I give people a voice in what they want. Now, I don't do everything that they want, because that would just, probably burn me out. But I'll pick certain things that seem quite good ideas or tickle my fancy, and I'll produce them. And if they, I don't mind tweaking. If I put a work in progress picture up and someone says, oh, it could have this or it could have that, I never mind tweaking it, because some people have really good ideas out there, And so I kind of like that. I like the fact that I have a small community that actually feeds me good ideas. And I kind of stumbled into doing mostly science fiction at the moment, whereas I wanted a mix of fantasy and science fiction, but it seems everyone leans towards science fiction in the group I'm in. Yeah. It doesn't mean I'm going to do fantasy, but I think, I'll just do an odd fantasy figure here or there. But most people like the science fiction that have latched onto my group anyway. So yeah, it's a chance to indulge myself in figures that I've always liked the idea of doing. I'm making some kind of Inquisitor style figures at the moment that were inspired by John Blanche's work back in the 80s, because I have one of his sketchbooks lying around, and I kind of wanted to do something like that for years and years, but never did. And so this month I decided, okay, well, I'm going to make an Inquisitor. Oh, not an Inquisitor. A science fiction questioner is what. Science fiction detective, that's it. There you go. So I took one of his sketches and kind of made something similar to that, with my own kind of twist on it. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. So it's nice that I can I can do that now. I just churn out what I want, and I had a good. I think that's why I had a good shift in numbers this month, is because I put a work in progress picture up of it, and it seemed to tickle a lot of people's fancies. So that's kind of cool. And it's nice to have that community. I built a community when I had Musketeer Miniatures, and it was a really loyal community. And I'd see the guys at shows all the time. They'd always come over and chat, and I knew, their faces and their names and that kind of thing. And if I went to I was playing Warhammer Ancient Battles, and I'd go and I'd see loads of faces there that I knew. And that was really good fun. It's nice having a community of people that you can, bounce ideas off, or just generally chat about the whole nerdiness of it all. And it's kind of nice to grow that again with, on the 3D printing community side of things. So, yeah, it's nice.
So what you're doing, your new endeavor is called Lost Heresy. And
yes. Yeah.
So people can go to patreon.com/Lost Heresy, right?
Yeah. And they can find me there, and they can excuse me. They can sign up for a normal monthly subscription, or they can, if they want to print and earn money from their prints, they can have a trader's subscription. And there's also now a commission tier where for a kind of reduced price, I'll make you whatever figure you want, and but it goes as part of the release for the following month. And that's only a recent thing. I've just made a Miss Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, but Pride and Prejudice with zombies. So she's a vampire hunter. So I did, rather than doing one version, I did 3 versions of her rather, because it was such a kind of cool little figure to do. So I did a few different variations for everyone. So that was kind of fun to do. And that's not something I would have thought of doing. So it's kind of nice to get someone going, here, this would be kind of cool to do. And there's a set of rules called the Silver Bayonet, which I think Mark wanted them for. And I've already done a kind of it's like a Napoleonic Gothic horror kind of game. And I'd already done a Napoleonic Austrian Hussar figure for it, which was, again, a lot of fun. So I'll probably add to that. I'll probably do a few more things like that, because they're just from the usual science fiction kind of stuff.
Very cool. And that makes me think of another, just back to digital and interesting things going on. So one, you're utilizing this new way of marketing your figures, which is through Patreon, where people typically subscribe and they get one or more figure or STLs a month for them to print off. And I think you're also on My Mini Factory.
I am, yeah. What you can do, it's a really great thing that My Mini Factory does, is it enables you to send people their STLs each month via My Mini Factory. You can, I started out by using just the Google Drive and giving people the link to the Google Drive to get their STLs. Well, My Miniature Factory, you can give them the link to the downloads, but they stay in their library, which means that they don't have to rush and download them.
Yeah.
And then keep them on their computer. They're permanently stored, which is really cool. It's a really good platform, and they're doing their own kind of Patreon thing now called Tribes, which is it's the same kind of thing. It's a subscription. You subscribe to your favorite sculptors, and then get them via Tribes. So I'm kind of in 2 minds whether to do that or not. Whether I need the extra admin to cover 2 sites. So that's that's up in the air. I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I'm going to stay with Patreon. I think Patreon's a good platform.
It is. Thank you all my patrons for supporting this channel of videos.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great bunch of people out there. But one of the things about doing it as I'm doing it is, because you don't go to shows and things like that, you've got to hit social media quite hard, or as best you can, to get out there. Because when you go to shows, everyone sees you. And then if they see your figures in a magazine, they, the name, there's that whole name recognition thing. But in social media, because there's so much stuff out there, and you only get a certain amount of bandwidth in exposure from things like Facebook and Instagram. They are real solid gatekeepers, and they'll only let people see so much, and then they'll stop sharing your stuff. So you've got to have that continuous, thing where you're constantly putting something out, so it's creeping into, people's feeds here, there, and everywhere. So that takes some doing, and obviously you can pay for exposure, but then you've got an advertising bill, and that can only you got to correspond that with how much you're earning each month. So
Right.
starting out, it's a balancing act. Yeah, I mean, we rely on things like shares when people, if people see a post with a from someone who's doing Patreon and stuff like that, and they like it, and please share it, because it really does help out the person in question. Yeah, namely me. So, but yeah, I mean, I try and share stuff as much as I can, because I know how difficult it can be to get the word out there if for people starting out. But it's a good platform for people if they want to just start a business. They can start it there, and it doesn't have to be all encompassing. I mean, I'm full time, but I'm lucky that I'm able to be full time. But if you have, if you work a normal 9 to 5 job, it doesn't mean you can't do that. You can just grow it steadily. You do a bit in the evenings or weekends or whatever, and you've still got that, ability to grow something. So I think that's a really good thing that it brings to the table. Yeah.
The other thing I want to say about my mini factory, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have all of your previous releases on there. So if people missed it on the Patreon, you can just pluck this one and that one. And it's all
the whole library of my manufacturer. So if they missed the previous months, they can, but they've subscribed already, they'll get a discount code. So if they want stuff from the previous months, they can go back and they'll get a good chunky discount off whatever they buy. So it enables people to get stuff that they might have missed out on, but they're not paying the full price for it. So that's kind of a common thing. I think most sculptors are giving a discount for that kind of thing. I'm constantly surprised at the amount of people that will come on there, they'll subscribe, and then they'll go back and buy a huge chunk of the figures you've already made out because of one figure that they've seen. So that's it's always nice to see that.
And it's very cool. I lost my train of thought again. I was going to ask you another question.
I think one of the things that I think about Patreon that is worth saying is if you're an artist of any kind, it's a really good place to be. Whether you're a sculptor, or you draw comics strips, or whether you just do art for art's sake, whatever. Patreon is a really good place to start a business of your own, or small, or just a hobby that might pay something every now and again. I think it's a great platform, really is. I'm big on doing your own, sort of rowing your own boat.
Yeah. So, well, that's what I was going to say. It's a neat business model to explore. For a long time before digital sculpts were really a concern, but I was already on Patreon. I was looking at was there ways to market your figures through there? Maybe a similar thing where you're doing a sculpt a month, but then you have to handle shipping, and which isn't terrible, but I think it's more practical to handle physical releases in a more traditional way, or in a more milestone way, like I do, when I put out, I build a big product and put it on Kickstarter. Then that kind of happens all at once, and then I do the next one. But this is very easy because you do a figure or a few figures, and it fires off to your patrons.
Yeah, that's it. That's another thing that's worth touching on, I think, is Kickstarter. Now, I haven't done a Kickstarter, but I'm determined to. So I'll probably be picking your brains at some point. But again, with Kickstarter, you can build a range of figures or terrain or whatever you want to do, build it all digitally, and there's no production cost involved. So when you see a Kickstarter, and you'll see that they need $19,000 for the Kickstarter to be funded, the huge chunk of that is all production cost. In fact, I'd say the majority of it is production cost. And you'll be able to tell me otherwise. I imagine that that's how it is. And then anything extra you get over that is kind of gravy. But with selling STLs, there is no production cost. There's literally no cost involved. You make the STL and you send it straight out at the end of the Kickstarter. And I think that is just fantastic because people aren't waiting. It's like with Kickstarters, you're there, you've got to wait for a couple of months now until it all gets ready, and they ship, which is fine. I still do Kickstarters for games and things like that. But there's something nice about thinking I can run a Kickstarter, I can give it not too high a goal to fund, and it'll fund if my work's good enough, and I haven't got factoring postage or production costs or any of that kind of stuff. So I think just having the ability to do that is excellent.
Kickstarter is a great way to get extra eyeballs and make it more of an event. It's just a lot harder to build a consistent following that's willing to jump on board in a massive way.
Yes, yeah, that's the key, isn't it? The key is having a base of customers there that are waiting for your product to get out. They, no matter what you do, they're kind of on board with it. So I think that's the key for any business is you have to build a kind of a solid fan base, if you like. That can be the tricky bit.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially like you were saying earlier, getting the word out, very challenging.
Yeah,
I'll do a big shout out to everyone who ever posts a painted figure or anything they ever get, because a lot of times they don't immediately say who it is, but I've found some amazing miniatures and sculptors that I've encountered because of people just sharing their work, their personal hobby, and then they're always very generous with sharing where they got it from and what they did, and that helps us immensely, and the other sculptors as well. So keep doing that. Plus it's fun, you want to show off all the cool stuff. So
I don't know about you, but I always get a real buzz when I see one of my figures painted by someone. That buzz has never ever gone away since I first had it, kind of 17 years ago or whatever. I just love it. I don't care how well it's painted, anything like that. I just like the fact that someone's likes my figure enough that they've took the time to put paint on. And I think that's great. I still get a buzz out of that.
It's neat to see the different interpretations too, because you're sculpting it, there's no color. Maybe you have something envisioned in your mind, and then you'll see this person do it that way and this person do it that way, and it's really cool. Really cool.
So it's nice, and I think there's I have a big appreciation for the people that, like you say, paint your stuff up and put it up there and let everyone know where it's coming from. It's great.
Well, I wanted to ask you one last little thing. I don't want to go into it too deep because this could be, I'm sure it's something we'll get into on the Sculpsters that everyone should watch. And actually, quick tangent. Everybody should go subscribe to Bill's channel. Just search Lost Heresy on YouTube. It should pop up. Because Bill, what we're doing, Patrick, Bill, and I, we're taking turns on who's posting the episode to their YouTube channel. So first episode is on mine. I think next one's on Patrick's. The third one will be on yours. Round and round. So we'll work on a way to help inform everyone.
I've got two channels. I did a Lost Heresy one.
Okay. Is that because I need for your video?
But I think I probably won't do anything on the Lost Heresy one because it was literally just to put the intro video on. That was all for. But I've got another channel called Bill Sculpts.
Sculpts.
What I'm going to do there is I'll be putting the Sculptors stuff in my playlist there, and I'm going to start doing a few time lapses and maybe small tutorials on digital. So if you're interested in that, then that'll be coming up soon.
Well,
So
I'll make sure and
yeah,
have the correct
still,
link down in the show notes here below.
yes,
So everybody, you can click that. You can search Bill Thornhill, Bill Sculpts. Hopefully that'll get you there as well. But my question was, how do I want to formulate this? What's like maybe a basic technique or a certain way you like to approach sculpting? Now you're all digital. We know you used to do dollies a lot, and you work in Procreate. What's kind of a real high level look at the way you approach a figure in ZBrush? Won't take an hour to talk about.
One of the things I don't do, which I should do more of, and this is, you ask any artist, this is, I don't use reference. I don't use reference enough. I wing it and then rely on my imagination and my memory as to what things look like. But working with reference is a lot better and it's a lot quicker as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something I'm trying to do now is I try to do just, even it's just a quick sketch and give me an idea of what I'm going to do. Whereas a lot of the time, I say when I was traditional, I didn't really have, I kind of let it happen. It's kind of weird to think, but I kind of just let it happen. I had a rough idea of where the legs would go. And then I try and build it from there. But now I kind of try and have a pose in my head that I can. I have basically a doll, like a puppet, if you like. So it's basically consists of a number of parts, subtools. So there's a torso, there's a hips, there's separate legs, separate arms with hands on, and then there's a head and neck. And that's all you need to be able to adjust when you adjust. And it's basically like a matchstick man. It's not bulked out or anything. You can get fleshed out dolls. You can download them off Flip Normals or Gumroad, and you can buy them. But I don't really think that they're not that easy to use. Or I don't find them very easy to use. Simply
you still
because
have to manipulate a lot of pieces.
Yeah, and you've got to
rebuild
the muscle. And what you try and do is you try and tease the muscles that they've made into shape, where it's a lot easier if you're just building them on yourself. Mm-hmm. It's a lot quicker. So I tend to use this like matchstick puppet, and I just make that. And then because most things are clothed, I'll just use basic primitive shapes like a tube, and I'll just put it over each arm, each leg. If the arm's bent, I'll put a little tube there, and I'll put a little tube there, then just mesh them together into a sleeve. And I just get that bare outline of clothing done first, and then really just go from there. I have usually now I have a better idea in my head of what pose I want, more than I used to when I was traditional sculpting. Like I say, when traditional sculpting, I just let it happen, but I tend to kind of think about the pose and what I want to envision with it.
Cool.
And just block it out in that very simple way. Bobby Jackson had he lent me his sculpting doll, which is basically just like it looked like a gingerbread man, with these huge hands, massive hands. And I was like, how on earth do you use that to make figures with? I was just bewildered. And instead of having, and the hands weren't even hands; it was like there was a square, and there was just like 3 balls for each finger, for each joint you got on your finger. And I just couldn't understand how he was using it. But that's the perfect thing to do: is just use primitives, set it into your shape that you want, the pose that you want, then start adding all the detail, blending it in and shaping it. And going from
a big, I'll call it a trap that a lot of sculptors fall into, is that idea that they need to get it fully rendered ahead of posing because they want to retain symmetry or all these other, and you can, and a lot of that's how a lot of video games and movies, because they need it to be fully rendered and then they're going to animate it. That we're not doing that. We're making little tiny sculptures where you can hint at detail and hide things. And so, it actually, I find you can get a lot of, more uniqueness and save time.
Yeah, I was going to say the only qualifier I put on that is if you're doing something with a lot of like armor on it, perhaps. then
But
it's
that's,
worth.
yeah, because that's going to
Then I
stay
will build.
rigid. It won't
I'll think out.
change. Yeah,
But,
good point.
but I simply do that to get the shape and the scale of it on the figure. But then I'll take a puppet,
Yeah, and then
pose
you
it,
have
and
to
then just take that arm
adjust that.
from.
That's almost, I almost view
Uh,
that when I'm sculpting as those are almost like pouches or inanimate objects you're affixing. I mean, they happen to be a little bit more tied to the form, right? Because they will be
yeah,
moved with the limbs and whatnot.
yeah,
But yeah, that's a good distinction. But yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
actually have seen some sculptors, and I want to try doing this sometime, where they actually keep it very primitive, and you basically put them into complete shape and pose, and maybe the only thing that has any good amount of detail might be the face beforehand, and then that you
yeah.
just sculpt it all as if you were sculpting a traditional figure, and it's not as difficult or challenging as you might think.
No, I watch. I like watching people's time lapse videos on YouTube, because it's really interesting to see how people, their work process, their
Hmm.
flow, and the ones that go the quickest are the ones that build everything from basic primitives, and they get, their figures always look better because they've got the base right, the basic shapes right. The big pitfall when you're starting out sculpting is to think you've got to work on the
Hmm.
detail straight away.
Like with anything,
It's
yeah.
not. Detail is the very last thing you put on there. You can have the best detail there is, but if you haven't got the form of the figure right, if the legs aren't posed right naturally, and the arms aren't and the head's not, then it doesn't matter how much detail you put on there, the figure won't look right. So for getting the form right is the most
Yeah.
important thing.
It's
Yeah.
almost an easier trap to fall into with digital than otherwise, like you were mentioning before, how you can just sit and sculpt and noodle forever. Well, now you can actually noodle and make totally realized detail, and you can move it and manipulate it and
Yeah.
not mess it up. But you might realize you did
Yeah.
all that work, and now it's not working with this form, or half it's going to be covered. Maybe you can
Yeah.
reuse it, but yeah, it's like with anything,
Yeah.
it's much better to get the
The,
overall design.
the basics of sculpting are still the
Hmm.
same as they are with traditional. You've got to have the basic idea of how to put a figure together. A decent understanding of anatomy, and how far a body will
Hmm.
bend. I always remember seeing some figures from a certain figure company that I shan't mention, but one of the figures had two elbows.
Huh. Not one
I
on each
kid you not.
arm.
It went like that, then it went like that, then it went like that, and then there's a
Oh
hand
my
sticking up.
gosh.
It was just like, you know, people, and it's just like you've got to have that basic, but you've got to know that we've only got one elbow in each arm, kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's funny.
yeah, it's worth spending a bit of time on anatomy. I still look at anatomy now and still try and learn off it, because you kind of never stop learning about how things move. It's all down to what kind of body type you're making, and
Hmm.
how much is revealed and that kind
Right.
of thing. So yeah,
Well, very cool. This has been a great chat, Bill. Um, yeah, thanks
yeah,
for sharing all this. It's been great to have you on again, on just my
it's a
show.
pleasure. Good to be back.
And
Yeah, it's a lot
yeah,
of fun. I think for anyone out there who fancies taking a plunge, download yourself Blender. Don't worry about all the, you know, making colors and textures and all that kind of thing on it. Just find out how to sculpt. There's plenty of tutorials out there, and just have fun with it. Yeah.
all right. Well, so everybody, make sure you go check out Bill's work at Lost Heresy. This is patreon.com/Lost Heresy. And you can search for him on
Thank you very much.
My Mini Factory as well. And be on the lookout for Bill's YouTube channel in the next episode of The Sculptors. And you know who I am and where we are and where to find my stuff. So all this will be down.
I was
Yeah.
going to add. I was going to
Yeah.
finally, sorry, Tom. If anyone wants to just download a couple of figures of mine that I've done for free, You can find them on 3D
Oh,
Cults, and you just look up Lost Heresy, and there's a couple of figures there that you can download and have a play with.
Quick question as we close out. What's it going to be called?
Last one.
What traditional figures, they call it the pile of shame or the lead pile. What's the term? What's it called now?
I don't know. It's probably going to be
the
hard drive of horror.
I love it. The hard drive of horror. I'm going to add those to my hard drive of horror.
The cloud of cringe, maybe. It's online. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure we'll all have one. I've already got one.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for being on, Bill, and thank you, everybody, for watching.
Pleasure.
Look forward to seeing your comments. If you have any questions for Bill, I'll float them to him, and maybe we'll answer them on a future episode of the Sculptors. So, look forward to see what everybody says.
That's good.
All right. Till next time, keep sculpting. Thanks for watching the Mini Sculpting Super Show. If you'd like to learn more about sculpting miniatures, subscribe and hit the notification button so you can find out whenever I post a new video, or check out some of the other videos on screen. If you'd like to support the show, check out my Patreon or head on over to my web store at thetommason.com.